Welcome to the Global Trade Forum, a knowledge sharing and cooperation platform of global thought leaders. Under our GTF interview series, we strive to foster a conducive environment for international trade by engaging with policymakers, business leaders, and civil society actors to advocate fair and sustainable trade relationships within the global trade industry. In light of our mission promoting sustainable trade, today's distinguished guest is Mr. Jimmy Nguyen, who served formerly as the founding president of Bitcoin Association and BSV Blockchain Association in Switzerland. Now, he is currently CEO of Blockchain for All, chairperson of Change Digital Commerce, and board member at 77 Ventures. Today in our program, we will focus more on the future of AI and its legal security concerns, as well as Bitcoin's position and financial environment, and surely hot topic metaverse. Jimmy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and hello from Dubai. I'm in a very hot June in the UAE.
Yeah, I can't imagine how is the summer in UAE.
It's great when you're in air conditioning.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jimmy, you have different senior roles in the private sector and before sectorial associations in analyzing and commenting technology policies, ranging from the legal aspects and the regulatory framework. And you have a multidisciplinary career and background. So, what inspired you to pursue your current career path, and how did you get started in it?
Sure. Well, very relevant to the topic we're focused on today, which is focused on law and policy. I actually was a lawyer for 21 years in the United States, and I graduated law school in the mid 1990s, right at the boom of the dot-com and Silicon Valley era in California. I lived and worked in Los Angeles and started my legal career at corporate law firms there. And that's when I decided to really focus on this new area at the time of the internet and new media. They used to call it back then, the delivery of media over new mechanisms through the internet. And so most of my career has been focused on whatever has been the new digital technology. First, it was the internet, then became mobile, social media, and it just kept expanding. And I was a partner at three of the major corporate law firms in the United States. So I represented everything from startup ventures up to some of the biggest companies in the world, such as Microsoft, Amazon, Uber, the major movie studios, and the Motion Picture Association of America. I'd always been interested in new technologies, and I knew at some point I wanted to leave the legal practice and get more into the business world. Starting around 2012, 13, some of my clients started calling me about Bitcoin for use in payments and online games and virtual currency systems to be used in games and for international money remittance. And that's what made me pay much more attention to it. And around 2015-16, I decided to leave my law partnership life and dive full time into the Bitcoin and blockchain industry, leading to roles as president of one of the major global blockchain associations, as well as CEO of one of the largest R&D firms in the world for blockchain. And now I'm launching a bunch of my own business initiatives, but still paying a lot of attention to policy. I actually consult and advise with several governments across the world, given my legal background. A lot of government people don't like crypto and crypto people who tend to be a little bit more libertarian anarchist in some respects. But I come at this from a much more law and compliance viewpoint, given my legal history. So that's how I got to do what I'm doing now. But it started by being a bright young lawyer in the 1990s.
Jimmy, as a leader who focuses on emerging technologies, as you have mentioned, and also as a lawyer, how do you foresee and assess the global legal landscape adapting to accommodate the advancements and the challenges of artificial intelligence technologies in the current environment and also for the upcoming years?
Sure. Historically, law has been very slow to adapt to new technologies. It took quite some time, I think, for the global legal frameworks to adapt to the internet. Usually what happens is that when a new technology emerges, legislatures, or in Europe, the parliaments, are not racing out to enact new laws. What usually happens is the court system, in the event of legal disputes, or regulatory agencies, as we're seeing in the blockchain and digital asset world, try to apply existing laws to new technology. But it takes a long time. with artificial intelligence, especially in the last year with the rise of ChatGPT catching a lot of attention. It has actually sparked a much faster reaction from policy and legislators around the world than I have seen before. So actually, I think the policymakers in the US and in the EU in particular have been faster to address artificial intelligence. I think because I think there's more fear about what it can do, and people
Mhm.
are seeing that. And that's why you're seeing a faster reaction. Normally, in the internet world, it took a good 10 plus years after the internet emerged for some of the best legal principles and policies to come into effect. Same thing with blockchain now. It's been over 13 years since Bitcoin emerged into the world, and we're seeing in the U.S. the struggle of how to regulate digital assets as a security or a commodity, and the SEC is now suing lots of exchanges and saying a lot of assets are securities, well after they've been in the marketplace. So that took quite some time. But with AI, even though AI efforts have been around a while, I think it was how visible people could see the effectiveness of ChatGPT or these photo generative AI applications, computer software AI, because people can see, experience it directly. I think it's leading to very rapid policy response.
Yeah, on the other hand, regulations are also so important, as you have mentioned, and laws and regulations are interconnected to each other. And how effective of regulating AI is still unclear and
Yeah.
seems to be quite complex as a public policy graduate also. And in the United States, 1 week ago, White House has released a policy idea that includes set of rules such as testing the AI systems before they are publicly available and protecting privacy rights.
Mhm.
And if we look from the European side, European Union is at the moment working on a artificial intelligence act,
Correct.
more or less within the same philosophy of United States. So besides the technicalities, in light of policy developments in the public sector, if we approach the issue from a philosophical point of view, should there be restrictive regulations to govern the deployment and the development of artificial intelligence technologies?
The reality is there will be. How restrictive they are is to be determined. The challenge, the difficulty with trying to govern artificial intelligence now is that it's still in its infancy, really, right? This is why usually law takes longer to respond to technology, because we don't even fully understand how all the technology works, how it can be implemented in business and in real life. And the technology functionality is still being developed, right? So it is, for example, with artificial intelligence, trying to figure out where all of the data is being ingested from, how of the models and algorithms that are written to generate the AI responses. That's all still in development. So it makes it very difficult, I think, for a parliament or the US, government or any government to set out very clear requirements now, because we can't even answer how it all fully works, right? Or how it all be implemented in real life. With that said, what I see both from the United States and the EU's AI Act that's in consideration now is trying to set out major principles. We saw this in the privacy world over the last 10 or 15 years when there was a lot more scrutiny, especially in Europe with GDPR laws, for example, about protecting consumer privacy. So the laws in privacy, there are some specific requirements, but they usually express governing principles, right? You need consent for consumers to get their data. You need to give consumers, particularly in the EU, the ability to be forgotten and to delete their data. You need to use the data in a way that's responsible. So often it's these big overarching principles. We're seeing the same thing now with AI. The White House in the United States has released a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, like we have a Bill of Rights in our Constitution to protect freedom of speech, for example. And it expresses general principles, which is you should not use algorithms in AI to discriminate against people in employment, based on political affiliation, based on protected categories such as race, gender, religion. That's a very general principle. It also repeats the data privacy principles. You need to get our individual consent to be able to use our data and information in AI algorithms. So it also provides this general governing principle about notice and explanation. For example, if we are interacting with a customer service app, right, which we do, chatbots, they're telling people now, as a company, you need to notify us as consumers that this is being auto-generated, and explain, and also give us as consumers the right to opt out. Maybe I want to talk to a human, right? And this is particularly important, and I noticed this has parallels all in the EU AI Act. It has very many of the same principles, right? You need to provide individuals the notice that things are being automatically generated by AI, the right to opt out, and especially for what they consider and define as high-risk sensitive areas. For example, when you're dealing with political campaign information, right, then you really need to be notified that things are being auto-generated. Recommendation engines in social media platforms, which influence our thinking and cause huge debates, especially in the US over political campaigns, right, are the recommendation engines on Facebook and Twitter influencing the information we receive, especially if it's AI generated. So a lot of it is just basic principles. We need to be notified. We need to have the right to opt out. You can't collect my data without informing me. And particularly with the EU, because I know there's a greater concern in Europe over identifying people and getting personal information. In the EU Act, I see a stronger emphasis than the United States policies right now about preventing and banning use of biometric identity information that might be collected from us in public, walking around with CCTV cameras, and using that to identify us, banning the use of that, for example, by law enforcement to try and predict your emotions and whether or not you might be, for example, ready to commit a crime in at any given moment. And so I think that that's a greater sensitivity in Europe. I'm sure when people realize that might be done in the US, we'll see some policy, concerns about that. But all of these things, I think, are good to think about, and they're happening faster than in other technologies. I think whether they'll be over-regulated or regulated enough, it's hard to say. What I'm seeing now is this sort of expression of general principles, which I think is good. How far you go in requiring companies to test all these things and build in protections into their algorithms, that's the tougher question, that practical implementation of determining whether, let's say, a particular company's AI generative product goes too far. That's a tougher call.
As we have understood from your remarks, there will be a lot of change in also the business environment. Because of the origination of artificial intelligence technologies, and we will have see the concrete implications on the human resources policies, even the companies. So particularly, as an expert, I would like to also take your advice, particularly for younger generations. How can young generations prepare themselves to succeed in this rapidly evolving arena? And what are the emerging career opportunities in the field of AI?
Sure. That's an excellent question. First of all, there is a lot of people from the blockchain world are starting to pivot to AI, even though there's a lot going on in all these spaces. First of all, I would tell people to try the products, right? Like, for example, when I interview people for a job, and when I've done it in the blockchain and digital asset space, if they've actually never engaged with cryptocurrency, digital assets, never opened a digital asset wallet and sent a transaction to another person, I don't need traders, but I need someone who's actually worked with the product. If you've never bought and dealt with an NFT and you want to work with me, you're not as credible. So actually working and testing out some of these products, I think, is really key. So young people have a great opportunity to test all these new AI products, especially the generative ones. It's actually even leading to opportunities for freelancers around the world to get jobs, right? Because now it's easier to be a graphic designer. It's easier to be a video editor, right? Because there are AI tools now to help you deliver product faster and cheaper than it used to be. So test them out. You might even get some freelance work along the way. And in addition, of course, reading. And finally, I think it's important to get out and talk to people. You can only do so much to get a job by sitting behind a computer screen. So that means finding local organizations such as yours and events around the world in your local areas that talk about these things, starting with the young developers and meetups or bigger events where the business people are. But I think you won't get a credible opportunity to get a job in the field unless you actually try to use the products. If you're in school and university still, try to find, let's say, an R&D project with a faculty member where you might be interning and volunteering your time. And finally, just be willing to volunteer time. It's hard to just get a job right away. If someone comes to me and says, hey, can I just work with you on a free little project for 2 or 3 months, giving you a few hours of time here or there, I find that very impressive. And it's an opportunity for you to learn skills that will be helpful in getting a long-term job.
Jimmy, you were the founding president of Bitcoin Association formerly. So I would like to jump from artificial intelligence to cryptocurrencies with a traditional question. I know it's a traditional question, but we really wonder what's your stance on it. Can cryptocurrencies replace with the actual currencies, or if there is an inclination toward that kind of transition, where are we now in this time scale?
So that's a complicated question to answer, because I will say the opposite of what most people think a Bitcoin blockchain advocate will say, which is that most of the cryptocurrency world we have today is just bad. It's just bad. There's far too many cryptocurrencies. There's over 20,000 listed on marketplaces across the world. There's no reason the world needs that many different digital currencies. The reason there are so many is that people figured out a few years ago, oh, I can make my own token or a new blockchain, get the coin listed on a crypto exchange, keep some of the coins, and if the price goes up, I make huge amounts of money. It became very easy to just get people in to make the fast money. And it led to really bad incentives. With that said, I still believe a lot in the power of what blockchain and digital currencies can do. And we have to go back to why Bitcoin was created in the first place. There's this unfortunate conception now that Bitcoin in the form of BTC, which is the main one, there's now competing versions of Bitcoin, which is a much longer story. It's become viewed now just as an investment asset, right? If you know anyone who's bought Bitcoin in the form of BTC, they probably don't spend it, right? They hold it, hoping the price goes up to get rich. And that's not what it was created to do. If you actually read the Satoshi Nakamoto white paper, it says very clearly, it was designed to solve a simple problem. There's no native way on the internet to send small amounts of money. And so it was designed to allow us to do that. Peer-to-peer, me to you, sending you electronic cash without someone in the middle, like a PayPal, a bank, a payment processor, who adds time and cost to send the payment. That's what it was designed to do, to send small casual payments across the internet. So for example, instead of paying for a monthly digital newspaper subscription, right, I could pay per article I read, maybe 5 cents, 10 US cents per article, or same equivalent in the EU. That's not possible with today's payment systems. And that's what Bitcoin was originally created to do. And that's the mission of the association I led with the competing version of Bitcoin called BSV, which is allow it to be able to do micropayments. Unfortunately, the crypto world that has emerged now, everyone just thinks of crypto, because I know my friends call me all the time saying, oh, what should I buy? What should I invest in? Not because they want to actually use it to spend, they just want an investment to get rich. And I have no problem with that, but I feel like we need to get back to the root of what this technology was created to do, which to allow micropayments. And this also allows all kinds of more powerful applications such as microfinance, peer-to-peer lending, especially in developing countries where the transaction fees are important. Being able to make international money remittance more efficient, instead of spending 6 to 8 to 10% of the amount to send money if you're a Filipino migrant worker from here in the Dubai, where they often come to work, back home, you could send it for mere pennies. That would change the world. It would allow us to really drive much more financial inclusion and financial empowerment for the people who really need it. The world didn't need Bitcoin and cryptocurrency for rich people to send 100,000 euros, 1 million euros anywhere in the world. Our payment systems work fine for that amount. It was the ability to send and power smaller amounts. And so that's what I hope we get back to. So I don't think the current cryptocurrency world will replace fiat currency because people don't want to spend the cryptocurrency. There are people like me who are working on stable coins. So I actually, as you mentioned, I'm now chairman of a company called Change Digital Commerce, which is making stable coins of the major world fiat currencies. We just launched our US dollar one, but not promoted to crypto people to say, buy this like Tether and just use it to trade crypto. We actually want it to be used in social media apps, games, other digital apps to be able to do small payments to power new business models. And our slogan is, change digital commerce, change the world, because you can have a lot of big power with small payments. So I think that's what we need to get to. And I think the current cryptocurrency world we have today will not replace fiat currency because the people who are in the crypto space don't want to spend it.
I get your point. So you're saying that we have to come back to fundamental and the main aim use of cryptocurrencies. On the other hand, while decentralization is one of Bitcoin's essential features, it also means that there is no central authority to address the governance and the disputes between the parties. So, what does proliferation of Bitcoin tells us about the potential future of economic systems, particularly in relation to monetary policies? I would like to emphasize monetary policies because there is no central authority, which means that there is no central bank. I would like to also ask that question.
Well, that is the $1 trillion question, isn't it? Which is, why there's been a bit of there's been a bit of a tension between the cryptocurrency early influencers and advocates and government, right? I sit in the middle. I don't believe Bitcoin cryptocurrencies were created and necessary to take down banks and take down government. Unfortunately, a lot of the early crypto advocates say
Mm-hmm.
that. And this is
Yes.
why a lot of the central banks and monetary authorities, are skeptical and concerned about digital assets. I totally understand. So you are correct that with digital assets, there's not supposed to be anyone in charge, right? There's not supposed to be a central authority. The reality is for most of the blockchain and digital assets ecosystems, there is, or there is a small number that do influence the blockchain, the protocol. If there's a problem, they can, for example, some of the blockchains over the last years have had attacks and, DDoS attacks, and they were able to shut down the network and just restart it. So while a lot of these networks say they're decentralized, the reality is there's a small group of people who really can influence and control the network. So I think this idea of decentralization is somewhat of a myth. With that said, it does create the potential for a system to send money value in the form of some, digital currency asset without a government authority in charge. So I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. It's not really the two polar extremes, and governments are policing these ecosystems. Maybe not the blockchains themselves, but the service providers, what they call in Europe the VASP, the virtual asset service providers, who operate the wallets, the exchanges, right, the custodians. So even though the blockchain may be less centralized in the minting and issuance and transacting of the coins, there are these companies like the crypto exchanges, the custodians who hold these assets, the market makers, who are private companies who the governments can govern. And we just saw this with, Europe just releasing this new MiCA, set of, laws and regulations, which will go into effect over the next, year. So it's hard to, it's like the internet. You can't really police the internet, but you can police the companies that operate on it: Google, YouTube, Facebook, Amazon. The same things happening in the digital asset.
Very good synonym. So I would like to also a little bit talk about metaverse, a hot topic, because We have known that you have ongoing projects on
Yeah.
metaverse that will instrumentalize the education sector as well as the real estate sector. So at that point, what potential opportunities and challenges do you foresee? And how might these investments impact the future of learning, for example, or property development? For instance, are we going to close all the uni campuses thanks to metaverse?
Yeah. I'm glad you framed the question that way, because I think most people in the outside world, when they hear metaverse, they think of, oh, it's a game, a place to play games or to,
No,
just
no.
watch entertainment. It can be, that's what most people initially think about it. But I actually think its most powerful early uses will come with things like education and industrial use. So, for example, I'm a partner in a big new venture called Meta Center, which is building physical real estate complexes in 5 global cities across the world, starting with London. The second will be here in the UAE, then Singapore, Sydney, Australia, and Miami in the United States. We're building an actual whole ecosystem anchored by a performance and theater space that will have technology where you can better merge the physical and virtual worlds, let's say watching a show or an advertiser brand launch, or maybe an interview like this, which can be done both in combination physically and virtually. But it will also have production studios so that companies or government entities that want to produce immersive experiences can come to us. We're going to launch an education academy to teach both business executives and creative professionals of how to work in this space, and have a startup incubator hub. So we're trying to provide the whole platform to do all this. And a main area of our focus is not just the entertainment. It is, for example, education, because one of the great things with a virtual and immersive experience is teaching, for example, space differently so that people can see planets, teaching biology, human anatomy in a different way so that with, let's say, AR or VR type headgear, you can actually see a 3-dimensional depiction of the human heart or the lungs and see how disease travels through the body. That will totally change how learning happens, especially for young people who have different learning aptitudes, right? We don't all learn the same way. I was a great book learner, so I did well in traditional school. But some young people are visual learners, right, who have trouble learning in traditional learning environments. One of my good friends, who's a big influencer in the tech space in the U.S., his son has certain learning disabilities. He's on the spectrum, and having visual learning completely changes the game for children like that. So I think that is great when we can take learning and make it very visual. This will also help with, for example, preserving culture, when governments want to create new forms of museums so that people don't have to physically travel to a physical museum but could see cultural artifacts, art. One of my good friends who lives part-time in Thailand is talking with the Thai Ministry of Tourism of to create digital twins of Thai temples, to be able to expand the access to viewing these things. So I think the educational use is strong, as well as real estate use. Imagine visualizing the construction of a building or a home, in 3 dimension, seeing something you might buy from far away, being able to monitor sites from a distance. This is happening in industrial usage, for example, so that you don't have to send people physically all the time to dangerous areas, right? Oil fields, things that are far away. And so I think that the uses from an industrial perspective, business, real estate, and education are profound. And I think you'll see them faster because there's a bigger business driver for it than the entertainment use. I'll leave you with one example, which is I'm on the board of another company based here in the UAE, which uses blockchain for invoice management and invoice financing. But it's also developed a customer service center for metaverse. Right now it's 2D, we'll be moving to 3D, that we're going to try to sell just to government entities to provide customer support through a metaverse environment. So for example, maybe if you're here in the UAE or Pakistan, you don't have to go down to the government office to do your interview for a travel visa. We are working to integrate with a friend of ours who has a company in Pakistan which manages Hajj and Umrah travel for Muslim pilgrims to Makkah in Saudi Arabia, and is actually going to try to create a pilot to use a metaverse environment to speed up the check-in process for pilgrims, because otherwise you have this huge amount traveling at one time. So I think those kinds of uses are really interesting enough that people
Yeah.
think about. It's a business driver. There's also someone to pay for it, and a reason as a consumer you would go use it, because we don't want to all sit for 10 hours a day in a with a headgear on, or even the new Apple Pro Vision. You might go in for 10 or 15 minutes, do your travel visa or your Umrah registration appointment, and then get out.
For the side of industry, maybe it even changed the many equilibrium prices in the market, in the traditional market, before they are going to do the more or less same thing. And if we approach the issue from an educational side, maybe we will explore new research methods, and these methods even may create a new literature. It's so important, and but also we have to also say that it's a really new concept for many people. So what do you want to say to those unaware of the metaverse yet?
Well, actually, I would say that the metaverse isn't really here yet, right? Even though I'm a big believer in it, I have some ventures I'm working on in the space. I feel like it's like the early internet. We're in steps to the metaverse, and I don't think people will physically really understand it until the hardware gets better. The announcement recently by Apple of its Pro Vision device, I think if you watch the video, it finally opened people's eyes to, oh, I can see how this might work in my life. So if you don't fully understand why the metaverse matters, I would say to you, I completely get it. It's because a lot of the technology and hardware is not quite there yet. But I think it's coming. And I think where businesses feel they can make money or save money using these immersive experiences, I think that's where we'll see some traction. I think the recent announcement by Apple of its Pro Vision really is going to kickstart more, because they're integrating with a development platform called Unity for game developers, and so that makes it easier for other companies to develop things that might be useful. Just like the emergence of the iPhone years ago really kickstarted, right, the smartphone, smart device world we live in today, that today you can't think of not having a smartphone or smart device. So I think we're in the very beginning. So if you don't understand it fully or understand why it might relate to you or your business, I totally get it. Give the industry a couple more years to really improve the hardware and other technology environments. Because the ultimate goal, if I could define really what I think a real metaverse is, it's something where the physical and digital worlds combine in what we call phygital. So that, for example, if I have this, nice cup that someone gave me some Arabian coffee in earlier, and I move it here in the physical world on the table, in a virtual digital twin of this office, it would move as well. But that requires more technology. It requires objects like this to have like RFID or other types of tagging so that they're being moved and they can be tracked in the virtual world. So we're not really there yet. And so that's why I'm working with companies such as InvoiceMate and MateSoul on these steps, which is just a 2D customer service experience, not a full 3D one, to get just the ball rolling.
For the metaverse, I want to ask the same question regarding legal security concerns, because our topic is more on, again, the security concerns, data privacy. How can policymakers ensure data privacy and security within the metaverse? Because it is going to be, as you have mentioned, both physical and both digital. So what's your thought on that?
It's funny, the last 5 to 7 years of my legal career, I really focused a lot on data privacy issues and became a certified information privacy professional for this very reason. It's becoming a big concern. I think that policymakers need to start looking at it. What's odd is I see policymakers looking at the data privacy and other policy issues for AI faster than metaverse, but I think it's because now we have AI products.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have a lot of metaverse products, right? With metaverse, I can tell you that some governments are already looking at this. One of the big governments of one of the major African countries that I deal with. They are looking at creating a metaverse policy. I might be, involved in helping them shape that. And one of the big concerns is privacy. Whether it's AI, internet, mobile, it's the same thing. Do you have privacy by design, which is the creation of the product? Does it have built-in privacy protections? Are you getting consent from users about what data they're collecting? They're collecting from you. Are you getting that consent? Are you explaining it in a clear way? With metaverse, you have more sensitive data, people's location, for example, what they're watching, experiencing, right? Which they may not want everyone to know about. It's similar to the internet, but you take up the sensitivity of the data up a notch, especially as we move into a world where every device around us might have an Internet of Things essentially connection. So just like everything is reading, sending data, that's critical to a metaverse. And I think that's the main sensitivity. How should policymakers deal with it? I would encourage them to deal with it in a similar way as they've dealt with in the internet, which is create overarching principles. It's don't over-regulate. You have to at some point tell the industry you want to protect consumer interests without telling them every single thing they need to do. But I would apply similar principles as they've done in the internet. I would also tell policymakers to engage now with some of the companies creating the metaverse and AI products, to ask them, tell us how your data is collected. Tell us what you do with it. Because you can't create a good law or regulation unless you actually understand what data is being collected, where it goes, how it's being
You have
used.
to know what you are not regulating. Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, this is what's hard, because sometimes the government people sit up here and they're not really in the trenches with the data. Of course, the companies are not always comfortable telling regulators everything that they're doing, but I think that's critical. I always say in everything I do, it comes down to data and understanding the data flow. Like I can't plan a blockchain product, an AI product, a metaverse product without understanding data flow. And I would tell policymakers, this is a great tip for young people who want to get into these fields. Start understanding data flows and data flow charts. What are all the different data elements down to the bit? Age, her personal name, is it date of birth collected, right? Location, device ID, location of the device, for at what intervals. What are all those data elements being collected? Where do they go? Right? Where do they get stored, for how long? And then what are they used for? And are they shared with anyone else? So much of the world we live in from a security perspective is about data for privacy. And then of course, once the data is stored, you have the cybersecurity concerns, right? But how do you protect the data from being hacked, right? And stolen? So it's both a concern of protecting consumer privacy, but then shielding that data from third-party attacks from a cybersecurity perspective.
Dear Jimmy, thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing valuable ideas with us. Do you have anything to add?
I would just tell your audience, since it's a trade audience, that all of these technologies, they can be scary. I remember being a young lawyer, and all the older lawyers, professionals I worked with, were scared of the internet. But today, we cannot imagine a world where any of us aren't putting our credit card information in the internet, which used to be a scary thing way back in the day, for those of you who might remember. And so while AI, metaverse, blockchain, NFTs, IoT, spatial computing, all these things may sound very scary, they can be, but they have immense power. And I would encourage us all not to be scared of them, both policymakers as well as business people, and embrace their power to really change the course of the world, especially for developing countries who want to use these technologies to leapfrog and become part of the global trade movement at a greater level. And I think that's what I encourage people to think about. It's why I spend time not just in the big developed countries, but in developing countries like Pakistan, Nigeria, and my native Vietnam, where I was born, to help bring growth of these technologies so that they can be a bigger part of the world trade marketplace. So I encourage you to think of that and how you all can use and embrace this technology to create, as I like to say, wins in the world, because my name is Jimmy Nguyen.
Today we have hosted Jimmy Nguyen, Chief Executive of Blockchain for All. Throughout this program, we have had the opportunity to delve into a wide range of topics from AI, Bitcoin's position in financial markets and environment, and Jimmy's own success story. If you like the program, please feel to share it. This is the end of our interview. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.